You can have a great retirement without doing any of this BS that we talk about all day long.
Are there any common misconceptions about retirement that you've discovered through your planning and through the community?
We tend to think of retirement like a light switch, on and off. There's a lot of in between,
How can retirees align their investments with their personal passions?
One key lesson related to somebody that's retired or getting ready to retire, I think, Joe, is...
All right, Roger, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Joe, I am excited to be here. I've spent many times in your area of outside Toronto.
Well, I'm excited to have you. As I already mentioned to you, you were probably my original inspiration for doing having a podcast. So here we are, kind of full circle for me. Now,
so how many episodes in are you?
I think by the time this comes out, this is probably going to be around episode 133, 135, somewhere in there.
That's a lot. And what is one lesson from that 100 and so episodes?
Probably committing to having, I would say, big rocks in general, but like things like this on the calendar ahead of time, knowing when I'm going to do these so that they actually happen and I'm not scrambling. So it's been good from a time management standpoint. And I've got better over the last few years at doing that for sure. Since we're talking about it, do you have any big lessons you've learned from your podcast?
Oh, yeah. Definitely that is one. I mean, we're at 570, so a lot.
Yeah.
Coming up on 11 years. It's totally changed my life in so many ways. So many lessons, but one is it's totally changed the way that I do retirement planning and accelerated my mastery journey on that topic because of the active thinking out loud about how to do it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, if you want to have a helpful show, I mean, it forces you to think about what you're talking about and dive in deeper and it gives you new perspectives. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, and you get the feedback from people actually doing it. You know, we have a newsletter. I'm guessing you have email conversations with people that listen. And if you're paying attention, it accelerates the flywheel of learning and evolving, and it forces you to be organized. Well, probably one key lesson related to somebody that's retired or getting ready to retire, I think, Joe, is when we would survey, and we always left places for open-ended answers. And probably one of the biggest ahas is that when listeners, people that listen to my show and probably your show, we use the word retirement, but if you ask them what that word really means, it's not really the absence of work. I mean, that's part of it, but it's more about freedom, time freedom and control and agency, which changes how you think about retirement planning, if you think about it.
Yeah. You know, I've often thought about using a different word for the podcast. So your retirement planning simplified and on our website and stuff, because I think some people have a bad idea or it leaves a bad taste in their mouth, but on the same hand, people also know what it means. So I've stuck with it just because it's obvious when people are looking for retirement planning info, but I think that's a really good point. It's almost more like a rebirth or a new beginning. It can mean a lot of things, not necessarily
change of seasons.
Like yeah,
I think you're smart to use the word. I mean, our show is the Retirement Answer Man. I don't really like the word retirement, but it's easier to evolve the meaning of a word than to create a new word, I think.
Yeah. There you go. That's perfect. All right. So you've been doing the retirement planning thing for a while. What are some of the biggest surprises that you've seen in working with retirees over the years?
Working with retirees is that change of seasons, and retirement is not binary. Number one, we tend to think of retirement like a light switch, on and off. There's a lot of in between, like a dimmer switch, that if people recognize that, there's a lot of opportunity to get the things that are most important to you earlier if you understand the in-betweens of decisions. A practical example would be, I want to retire when I'm 62. We always like to set dates, right?
Yep.
And we think of retirement as turning off full-time work. And oftentimes in planning, if you start to explore the in between, well, what if you just slowed down and worked, half time or 3/4 time, or even just commuted 2 days a week and stayed home the other 3 days? Those dials might allow you to gain more time freedom early to start doing that, say at 59 rather than waiting to 62. So like that's one. And it's really it's empowering to people to start to think about the different levers they have to get more of the life they want. I think that is a big one. The second big one, which is I'm guessing we'll go into, is retirement is not a spreadsheet. It is not a math problem. And retirement planning was developed by retirement planners, which came from the insurance industry and the investment industry, which meant that money is always the center of the hub of the retirement planning process, when really your life is the center, and the money and the spreadsheets, not that those aren't important, they are, but they're subservient to your life. That is, I think, critical, because we can get lost in the numbers if we're geeky and think we have to get precise, or if we're not geeky, we can get overwhelmed by the numbers and just say, screw this, I'll just work.
Yeah, 100%. So why don't we go there right now? So let's talk about it, investing in what you love. So I know in your philosophy, you kind of emphasize the idea of not just investing in your portfolio, but investing in your life. So how can retirees align their investments with their personal passions? How should they think about this?
So when you say invest in their personal passions, what do you mean by investing? Like their time and energy, and maybe their money, or
time and energy, money, probably all of the above.
Okay. From an organizing principle, it's good to make some sense of all of this stuff, because it can get really confusing, right? We talk about 4 pillars on the financial side, because that is critical. I don't want to underplay that.
Sure.
And that's having a vision for what you want your life to be, doing the work to make sure it's feasible, making it resilient, and optimizing it on the money side. So that's the order I would always go through things. On the non-financial side, a lot of times when we retire, we shortchange this because we're so freaked out about the money, partly because it's an important issue, and partly because people like you and I, not you and I, but in our industry, tell you to be freaked out about the money. We shortchange what the heck our life is actually going to be in this new season, because there are a lot of huge changes outside of not working that will hit us unexpectedly if we're not aware of it. And this comes down to, so where should you invest that energy and thought? I mean, it's not rocket science. It's the same as my son who's 29 or my daughter who's 28. They need to invest in these things too. One is energy. You have to have the energy to show up for your life, right? And that's eating, moving, sleeping. And later in life, you haven't experienced this as much as I have, Joe, I'm guessing, but you feel it more. You have to focus a little bit more, because, you're sort of riding your bicycle into a headwind energy wise. Yep. You got to be intentional there. Once you have the energy, you have to cultivate the right mindset, right? Of a growth versus scarcity mindset. Harder to do as you get older, where scarcity seems to be slowly coming on you. People are passing away or moving away. You can't run as fast, or you can't do the number of things. You have to battle that so you don't allow your world to get smaller. Mindset. Number 3 is passions. Happy people have projects. So we need to spend time, your project is this podcast, and your practice, just like mine. Your project is usually filled by work or school and other things that you're doing outside of those things. But that organizing principle of achieving and striving goes away when you retire. All of a sudden, nobody's giving you an award. Nobody's telling you to go work on this and giving you that a boy or that a girl when you hit it. You have to figure out what are interesting problems that you're going to explore. So outside of work. And then relationships, which is really the key to happiness, is the quality of the relationships. Because, and as you get older, like we were talking about, that can get smaller and smaller. Your friends pass away, they move away, family dies and moves away. So you have to actively regenerate your relationships. You and I have a great example of this in our common connection, Benjamin Brandt.
Yep.
Benjamin and I are extremely good friends. I don't even know, how old is Benjamin? How old are you, Joe?
I'll be 40 next week. I think Ben's like 42 to 44, somewhere in there.
Right. So I'm 58. A lot of my friends are dudes like you and ladies like you that help keep me young, and I help, I contribute to their life in some way. That's a healthy thing. That's a way of fostering, real quality relationships. So I think those are the areas that we need to invest our time and energy, and some money maybe, is in those 4 pillars.
Okay. I love that. Could you give some examples maybe of some projects or interesting ideas that you've seen some of your clients or Rock Retirement members take on that have provided that purpose for them?
Yeah, we have a number that have started podcasts. We have a number that, it can be as simple as, and it's even saying it's simple as understating it is, a lot of people are focused on creating experiences with their children and helping their grandchildren. It doesn't have, that's actually how you change the world. A passion, we think about what is your purpose in retirement. Well, who the heck knows that? I mean, you can't really whiteboard that. You have to explore your curiosity. So we have one lady who is exploring her curiosity in travel, where she never traveled before. That's probably my favorite story from the club over 7-8 years. She had an aha moment there. We have people that are exploring starting nonprofits. We have people that are mentoring. We have a lot of people that are just mentoring other people. That's probably the most prevalent one.
Okay.
I don't have the framework in front of me, Joe, but there's a framework in the Jewish culture of these stages of life.
Right.
And one is, I think around the 60s, is the gray-haired one. And the role that one plays is to mentor and help provide the wisdom and perspective to the younger generation. And I think that's the role that we try to help people lean into, and they get to figure out what that means to them.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think to your point there a second ago that when we started using words like purpose, people might get a little bit freaked out about that, right? So
yeah, we had a meetup in the Rock Retirement Club in Florida last year. And whenever I travel, we do these meetups where we'll hang out in a room for 4 hours, and I'll just lead conversation about financial and non-financial side. And we'll get 10 to 30 people show up. It's an amazing conversation that happens organically. There's no major agenda. And we had this conversation about purpose. We were talking about purpose in retirement, Joe. And a gentleman shared that he had delayed his retirement a year or two because he was struggling so much because he didn't know what his purpose would be when he retired. And that was a real aha moment for me and some of the coaches that were in the room of, whoa, we need to slow down in talking about, you need to know what you're retiring to and having a purpose, because that sets up this peak that is intimidating, which can cause you to stay in an unhealthy situation or a situation you don't want to be in. So I agree with you. We need to pull back. You don't need to have a purpose to retire.
Yeah. Some of the language that we've switched to is like figuring out your priorities. What are your priorities going to be? Right. So I give the example of, like, right now, my priorities would be my family, my business, and my health. Those are the 3 things that take the majority of my time that I want to make sure get prioritized over all the other things happening in the world. And then I give the example, of how once you get to retirement, like, one of your priorities could just switch to basically, like you said, exploring your curiosities and trying new things. You could just make it literally, that's just one of the things that you're prioritizing, is trying new things that you've had an interest in that you never got around to, and until you find something that maybe sticks.
Yeah, I think that's the key word. Curiosity is, when you leave work, don't feel like you have to have a purpose, but lean into curiosity, which has been atrophied sometimes during the bustle of work. The 2 most interesting people that I've ever been exposed to. One alive, one dead. The gentleman that is dead is Richard Feynman, who was a professor and researcher. He was part of the Manhattan Project when he was a kid. He was part of the committee that discovered why the shuttle Challenger blew up. I highly recommend reading Richard Feynman's book. He's just a funny character. But his life is around curiosity. That's the thread in his life. And the other who is alive, who nobody knows about, is a gentleman named Rajiv Roy. And actually, he has an ongoing blog, rajivroy.com. He's been a friend and client for decades. He is one of the most curious people I know. And when you're curious, you're asking open-ended questions and exploring them. So it's like a dangling thread on a sweater. Now let me pull that thread for a little bit. And then sometimes you just pull it a little bit and it's not that interesting. So you move on to a different thread. But every now and then you find a thread and you just keep pulling and pulling and pulling. It took me 25 years to find my thread. So I think it's more the pursuit than the whiteboarding and writing your statement out.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So we've touched on a couple times both the importance of having social engagement in retirement, and we've talked about or mentioned the Rock Retirement Club. Maybe you could just talk a little bit more around your thoughts on the importance of that social engagement and how you're using the Rock Retirement Club to help with that.
Yeah, the Rock Retirement Club started as an experiment. It started as a curiosity with no real plan of what it would be, and didn't know if it would work or what form it would take. And then we started it and have just kept iterating. So that's a good example of curiosity, but we're about 8 or 9 years in. So the club is about 1,400 members, where we have adult conversations around the 4 pillars on the financial side, the 4 pillars on the non-financial side, where myself and my team do teaching and coaching. But even more importantly, it creates a cohort of people that provide feedback loops and exemplars for different aspects of retirement, because we're hanging out with people that are a little bit ahead of us in certain areas or a little bit behind of us in certain areas. And it's really important to have feedback loops. You know, what's the old Jim Rohn quote? You're like, you are the 5 people you hang out with type of thing. And there's very few places in this world to be able to talk honestly about money and about purpose and about energy and this season of life, where you're not getting into politics or into whatever. And so it's a adverse selection of highly intentional people that have had some success and that are seeking how to create a great life. And those are the people that everybody is hanging out with. So you get this beautiful culture and feedback loop where nobody's coming with problems. They're just coming with solutions, and they're coming with their perspective on things. So you got to be careful who you hang out with.
Yeah.
Because that will define your life. So it's a subset of people that people like us do these things.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing to see. And I have
That's
a great
awesome.
Story about that if you want to hear it.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. This is my favorite story. I have others, but I keep focusing on this one. So this is probably 3-4 years ago. There was a lady in the club. I interviewed her on the podcast a few months ago. She finally was comfortable with doing that. She and I were having a one-on-one conversation, and she was in her early 60s. And here's the order of the conversation briefly. One, it was obvious that she was financially fine. She was going to be okay financially. 2, she expressed a desire to always travel to Europe. She had never been to Europe, always had a desire to travel to Europe. 3, she forecasted, probably in the next 5, 6, 7 years, I'll travel to Europe. I will do this someday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then 4, after she gives me those 3 things, Joe, and you're gonna know the answer right away after you hear this 4th one, and probably everybody listening will too. Then she starts talking about how when her mom was blind, and there's some genetic thing going on, and I'm just listening. And she has a younger sister, and she's starting to show some signs with her sight. And so they're exploring whether she's on the progression to become blind as well. And then she says, well, I think I might have this too. What are you thinking?
What are we waiting for?
What the hell are you waiting for? And that's essentially what I said. And to see her eyes, to her, it was like a light bulb. Oh yeah. What am I waiting for? But for those of you that are watching the video, it's like if you're inside your own coffee cup, you don't get perspective. But she is a single lady. She's lesbian. And that's a little scary to go travel in the world by yourself.
Sure.
So what we did was, and this is the power of community, Joe, is at that time she was wanting to stay a little bit anonymous. So I took her story and I asked her permission, and I held a meetup in the club and outlined the bullet points that I said. And I'm like, a lot of you have traveled internationally into Europe. A lot of you are single. What are the resources that this person should focus on? What are some travel ideas in terms of, just airplanes or travel groups, all these different things. And we had an hour session brainstorming and people speaking, because we're on a Zoom call where we can see everybody.
Yeah.
And also pouring into her encouragement verbally. Yeah. And the etymology of encourage really means to put in courage, right? So we took all of this. She got to listen to it anonymously. And then we created a travel to Europe worksheet with all the ideas organized and everything. And then like 3 or 4 months later, she texts me a photo from like Munich. I mean, that is what it's about. That's the power of community, of having people encourage you and empower you to take action on what's important to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great story. And without that community, she probably never would have went, just the way you're telling the story.
Yeah. Talk to her today. She's been to Europe over 10 times.
Amazing.
So it's changed. She will say it's changed her life, or helped her change her life.
Yeah. Awesome. What a great story. Are there any other, we talked a little bit about this at the start, but are there any other, I guess, maybe common misconceptions about retirement that you've discovered through your planning and through the community?
It's related to this one. One misconception is more complicated than it actually is. Yeah. People come into retirement planning either overwhelmed and intimidated, or focused on the wrong things. And not you and I, but the financial media and our industry are a big cause of that. So if you go back to my pillars, what do I want? Is it feasible? How do I make it resilient? Then how do I optimize it? Optimization tends to be the focus of conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I call it the financial bling of planning, right? Putting on a sexy Roth conversion, or locating my assets in the right account for tax efficiency. I mean, this is all bling that is meant to enhance a journey after you have you can have a great retirement without doing any of this BS that we talk about all day long. That's probably one misconception.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'd agree 100% with that. And that's a big part of the podcast and the YouTube channel stuff, like Your Retirement Planning Simplified, is a couple things. One of our core values is approachability, because we know a lot of people don't get the help that they want because they think it's too technical and they're going to be embarrassed or judged by not knowing some of the stuff. And two is, to your point, it doesn't have to be complicated, right? Like there's some things we can do.
And they get intimidated, I imagine, because they don't want to ask the questions, other the fundamental questions, because everybody's talking about stuff they don't understand. So they don't ask.
Yeah.
When they don't realize all those people are the ones that are off course, and they're actually the ones that are asking the really important questions.
Yeah.
I don't care about Roth conversions. How the heck do I create a paycheck?
Yeah. Exactly.
We even see that in the club, because we have the geeky people are always going to geek out, and because this is their hobby in a way.
Yeah.
But we can't, and our challenge in the club is always, and with clients is always, to make sure there's room for what's important, and not let those people, the majority of people in the club, I think, Joe, are like what we're talking about. They just want to have a great life. And this is a means to an end, not an end in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So you've talked a little bit about your 4 pillars on the financial side. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your kind of approach with agile planning versus a traditional like one-time plan. Like here's your 70 pages, have fun.
Yeah, I'm cool with one-time plans. I mean, we have someone on our team that does it. It's less about one-time plans or ongoing planning than how you actually do planning.
Right.
So I'm a certified financial planner, have been for a long time. I used to teach it at part of the CFP curriculum program at our local university to certificate, not holders, but I guess aspiring holders.
Yeah.
So I always call myself a classically trained retirement planner or financial planner.
Right.
And where I think the industry and the planning process got it wrong is we approached it in 2 ways that really set the table in the wrong way. Number one is that if you go through the CFP curriculum in retirement planning, the financial side, it's essentially a huge net present value calculator, with detail in it, which is not how you do retirement planning. And it focuses on creating the artifact, not the framework for decision-making.
Yeah.
And I think where it missed the boat, and I think where most of us miss the boat in our industry is, and this is not just retirement planning, but financial planning is, it's about the process of making organized decisions, not trying to figure everything out and be the smartest person in the room. We've spent so little time on how do we make decisions, how do we improve our decision making, and how do we improve the consistency of our decision making? Because consistency is a force multiplier. You can't just make one great decision in an organized way twice a year. You got to do it every day, just like you have to tell your spouse or significant other, I love you, every day. You can't just do it once a year and think you got it done. And so the epiphany for me was I looked outside of our industry for how to organize planning. And where I borrowed from was agile project management, which is from the software world, which is not trying to create the perfect everything. It's trying to have a structure for constant improvement,
right,
and iteration. And so now our advisory firm is Agile Retirement Management. We use an agile approach. We don't have meetings. We have huddles. We don't have formal financial plans. We have a project board.
Okay.
That we constantly work off of.
Okay. I love that. That's great. And then are you managing that project board by priorities? Like this is what's come up. This is the next thing we need to be adjusting. Obviously, there's always decisions that need to be made, but how would you organize something like that?
So if you think about the fundamental premise of everything I talk about is to allow people to have the confidence to go live their life. Right. And I would like at some point to talk about the crisis of confidence. Okay. So when you think of your process, it's about how do I have the confidence to go do things? And so our process is structured around 2 foundations. Number one is once we build what we call a plan of record, this is our plan and this is how we're executing the plan. We have a standard of care, which is what things that we should revisit or address and in what frequency we should revisit them. So we have a standard of care, which is essentially the tending of the plan of care or plan of record, so we can iterate on it and identify changes early. So that's number one.
Okay.
And those are structured little conversations that are focused on the right things. And the secret, are you married, Joe?
I am.
Okay. We just met here today. So as a wise old man, do you know what the secret to a good marriage is?
Tell me.
I'm going to tell you. My secret to a good marriage, and it's worked relatively well for 30 plus years, is you never want to have a big conversation with your spouse. If you can avoid big conversations, you're probably doing pretty well, because what that says underneath is that you're having enough little conversations, sometimes uncomfortable conversations, that you can identify opportunities for the two of you or conflicts with the two of you early.
Right.
So resentment doesn't build, and that doesn't spiral in somebody's mind and you start walking separately. Well, it's the same thing in retirement planning. The standard of care are structured little conversations so we can identify opportunities, changes in priorities, and risks that we can take little baby actions on. So that's number one. And then number two, what we overlay on that is we have clients create their personal benchmark, which is at the beginning of every year, we say, okay, looking out over the next 12 months, what are things at the end of the year that you want to have in place or want to have clarity on or take some action on that we overlay on the process? And those can be, I really want to get this Roth conversion thing put to bed and know what my plan is. Or I'm a road warrior and I'm retiring and I really need to make some local friends. It can go anywhere. And then we use that personal benchmark. We organize it by, okay, we can't do all of things. Which ones are the most important? And then what quarter are we going to focus on each one?
Okay.
And that way it stays relevant to where their mind is and their priorities are at the time. That's
great. I love that. Do you get anyone telling you they just want to get a 15% rate of return by the end of the year?
We do not. Good, and because they probably wouldn't get in the door to begin with, because we are focused on outcomes, not that, for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah, that is not a fit.
Agreed, 100%. Okay, so that's awesome. I love getting that perspective on how you're helping people keep things top of mind, having those smaller conversations, and the marriage thing's a great analogy on that. What are some things? Actually, you talked about the would you say confidence crisis? What'd you call that?
Yeah, confident. There are two retirement crises. Is it crises, Joe?
We'll go with it.
All right, whatever. There are two. There's the real one, right? Which is the majority of people don't have any money.
Yeah.
And they're later in life for whatever reason. That's the real crisis. I'm not solving that one. I don't think anybody's really solving that one.
Yeah.
There's another crisis that I've seen, which are generally the people that listen to podcasts and others, is there are people that had done relatively well in accumulating. For whatever reason, they didn't have bad luck, come into their life. They had some good breaks. They obviously worked hard and they were diligent and saved and everything else. And now they're later in life and they have resources of some level. That group has a crisis as well, but we don't talk about it because the big crisis is so important of substance that this one just seems weird to even talk about, but it's there. And that is a crisis of confidence. I have been in the club and in clients of, they're so worried about the future, because having more money doesn't make you not worried about the future. It just creates different problems. And we've seen studies where the wealthy they would never define themselves as wealthy, et cetera.
Yeah.
They're just as afraid and uncertain about their life in the future as everybody else, rightly or wrongly. And that's a problem. That's a problem on a couple fold. One is they're going to shortchange their life. They're going to get to the end of life and have regrets. I'm a big fan of the book 5 Regrets of the Dying. Bronnie Ware, I believe. That's a big problem, having regret at the end of life. They're going to sacrifice their life by working an extra year or not taking that vacation or not giving that charitable contribution because they're worried about their future in the financial. And that robs their life, selfishly, of the experiences they can. That robs their family because they can't speak into their family's life in creating experiences or helping give them a hand up. But it also, and I think this is huge, robs the world. You have people that, for whatever reason, have resources that can contribute to the world either through their works or their money or a combination of that, who are not doing that because they're afraid. They're worried about their future. And that's robbing the world. So how do you create a framework to help them have confidence is really my thread that I continue to pull.
Okay. And do you have any initial thoughts on that?
I'm doing it. I'm working on if you don't have some clarity of the future from a plan of record to know, if I do this, am I still okay? You're not going to do it. And you have to believe it in clarity within numbers, but you also have to be able to identify agency. So if you look at the science of hope, is you have to have three things to have hope. You have to have a vision of a better future. I want to give to the world or to my family in some way. You have to find agency. How can I act to create that better future? But that's not enough. You also have to have pathways. Well, what ways could I do that? So you can apply the agency. And that's what a framework provides you. And that's not just a one-time plan. You have to manage it because everything's going to change a million times.
Yeah. And that's where those conversations are coming in, those regular conversations.
But if you do the math work, if it stays in a spreadsheet, you're never going to have confidence because the math just is battling against you because of inflation and market returns, and you're going to live so long and spend so much.
Yeah. No, that's perfect.
That's my thread.
I like it. Now, before we wrap up, is there anything else that we didn't talk about today that you think our listeners should hear before we wrap it up?
What do you think, Joe?
I don't know. I think we've done a good job. We've hit something that's been a pretty regular topic as of late is a social engagement piece and some of these kind of non-financial things. We talked about the agile way of managing the plan going forward once you have your plan of record. And some of those other experiences you've had through the Rock Retirement Clubs. I think we've hit on some pretty good things. And I especially like the way you just talked about that, the second big crisis, which I think is important for people to even understand that it is a crisis. Cause I think a lot of people who are in that scenario having that crisis don't realize they're having that crisis. Right.
I think if there's one other thing, and this is, when I have a conversation with most anyone, the first two things I say, oh, what's on your mind? The second thing, because usually we're talking about a topic, let's say in a client setting, or when I have a podcast, the most important thing for me to do is to have a point, is to have, what is my intent in sharing this? So if we're thinking about a Roth conversion, the most important thing to define as clearly as possible is, what am I trying to accomplish? What is my intent in this exercise? So I guess my challenge would be for you and for me and for anyone listening, based on some of the things we talked about today, what's one thing that you can grab and pull the thread on to see how that can improve your plan or your life?
I love that. And I think if I was going to guide someone to an intent, I think it would be starting to explore your curiosity if you haven't already. Because I think
Richard Feynman books are just good for the soul.
There you go. That works too. Roger, where can our listeners learn more about you, the Rock Retirement Club, or anything else you want to share?
My home everywhere is, I'm not really on social. So the podcast, Retirement Answer Man, is where I think out loud about all this stuff.
Awesome. So we'll make sure that's in the show notes. We'll also get some of those other books that you mentioned today into the show notes as well. Roger, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, Joe. Thanks.